The night was heavy with rain when Aisha was told her fate. The air inside her father's house hung thick with incense and tension. Her mother's eyes were red from crying, but she said nothing. It was her father who spoke the words that shattered Aisha's dreams. "You will marry Hamid next week," he said, voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Aisha froze. She had never met Hamid. She only knew he was a wealthy merchant from a distant town, a man twice her age. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. "Father, please, I don't know him," she whispered. Her father's eyes softened for a moment, but then hardened again. "This marriage will save our family. His dowry will pay our debts. You must do your duty." Aisha turned to her mother for help, but her mother only looked down, her lips trembling. The decision had been made. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur. Aisha's friends came to dress her in silks, paint her hands with henna, and whisper words of comfort that sounded hollow in her ears. She felt like a prisoner being prepared for exile. Her laughter had disappeared, replaced by a quiet numbness. The wedding was grand, filled with gold, music, and smiles that masked sorrow. Hamid stood tall and proud beside her, a man of few words and many years. His dark eyes watched her with a strange mixture of curiosity and detachment. When he took her hand, it was firm, unfamiliar, and cold. After the ceremony, Aisha left her father's house and entered a new world, Hamid's world. His home was vast, surrounded by high walls that kept out both danger and freedom. Servants bowed as she passed, but their eyes never met hers. Hamid was not cruel, but neither was he kind. He spoke to her with the politeness one uses for a stranger. At meals, he asked about her comfort, her health, and whether she needed anything. Yet his words lacked warmth. Aisha answered softly, always careful not to offend. Days turned into weeks, and Aisha felt her spirit fading. She spent her mornings tending to the garden, her only refuge, and her evenings sewing by the window, watching the sun disappear beyond the walls. She began to dream of escape, but there was nowhere to go. One evening, while arranging flowers in the courtyard, she noticed a small boy watching her from behind a pillar. He looked about 7 years old, his clothes simple but neat. "Who are you?" Aisha asked gently. The boy stepped forward, clutching a wooden horse. "I'm Omar," he said shyly. "Are you the new lady?" She smiled for the first time in days. "Yes, I suppose I am." He grinned. "You're prettier than the last one." Aisha blinked. "The last one?" He nodded innocently. "Father's first wife. She died when I was little." The words struck her like a blow. She had not known Hamid had been married before. Looking at Omar, she suddenly understood the quiet sadness that lingered in Hamid's eyes. From that day, Omar became her shadow. He followed her through the garden, asked her endless questions, and told her stories about his toys and the stray cat that lived by the gate. Aisha grew fond of him quickly. His laughter brought life to the silent house, and for the first time, she felt needed. One afternoon, while she and Omar were planting new roses, Hamid appeared. He stood watching them for a long moment before speaking. "He likes you," Hamid said quietly. Aisha looked up, surprised. "He's a wonderful boy." Hamid nodded. "He hasn't laughed like that in years." His gaze softened. "Thank you." It was the first time he had thanked her for anything. As the months passed, Aisha began to see another side of Hamid. Beneath his stern exterior was a man shaped by loss and duty. He had built his wealth through hardship, caring for a son alone after his wife's death. He did not know how to show affection, only responsibility. One evening, Hamid invited her to walk with him in the garden. The moonlight silvered the path, and the air was cool with the scent of jasmine. I know this marriage was not your choice, he said after a long silence. I did not wish to take a wife by force, but your father insisted. He said you understood. Aisha's heart twisted. I was never asked, she said softly. Hamid's jaw tightened. Then I owe you an apology. They walked without speaking for a while. Finally, Hamid said, I do not expect your love, Aisha. But I will give you freedom within these walls. You may manage the house as you please. Teach Omar, if you wish. I only ask for respect. That night, as Aisha lay awake, she realized something had shifted. He was not the monster she had imagined. He was, like her, trapped in the web of duty and expectation. Seasons changed. The roses she had planted bloomed, and the house grew warmer with laughter. Aisha taught Omar to read and write. She began to oversee the servants, organize the storerooms, and run the household efficiently. Hamid started to rely on her judgment, seeking her advice on trade matters and household affairs. Slowly, she became more than a wife by name, she became a partner. One evening, Hamid returned home from a long journey. Aisha was waiting in the courtyard, Omar beside her. When Hamid saw them, something in his expression softened. He handed Aisha a small box. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet. For you, he said simply. Aisha hesitated. Why? He smiled faintly. Because you've brought peace to my home. And to me. It was the first genuine smile she had ever seen from him. It made her chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. Days turned into months, and affection began to grow quietly between them, unspoken but undeniable. Hamid started joining her in the garden, sharing stories from his travels. Aisha found herself laughing again, sometimes forgetting the bitterness of how their story had begun. Yet not everything was easy. In the nearby town, whispers spread about how Hamid's young wife had tamed him, about how she must have bewitched him. Aisha learned to ignore the gossip, but it hurt. One afternoon, while at the market with Omar, she overheard two women whispering. She was sold to him, one said. Poor thing. But I hear she's clever, using her beauty to control him. Aisha felt the words sting like knives. That night, when Hamid returned, she sat silently through dinner. He noticed. What troubles you? He asked. She looked at him, her eyes filled with quiet defiance. Do you regret marrying me? Hamid frowned. Why would you ask that? People talk, she said bitterly. They say I was bought. That I only care for your wealth. Hamid's gaze grew intense. Do you believe them? She shook her head slowly. No, but it hurts. He reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. Let them talk. They do not know what we have built here. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, she realized how much his words mattered to her. Years passed, and Aisha's world transformed. The girl who had once been forced into marriage had become a woman who found strength within it. She and Hamid grew closer, bound by trust, respect, and quiet love. Omar grew into a young man, bright and kind, and always called her mother. One day, when Aisha was arranging the morning flowers, Hamid approached her with a letter. A messenger came from your village, he said. It's from your father. Aisha's hands trembled as she opened it. Her father's handwriting was weak, shaky. He was ill, asking her to visit before it was too late. Hamid did not hesitate. We leave tomorrow, he said. When they reached her village, Aisha found her father. Frail and pale, he looked at her with tears in his eyes. I wronged you, child, he whispered. I thought I was saving you, but I only gave you pain. Aisha knelt beside him, holding his hand. You gave me a path I never chose, she said softly. But I walked it, and it led me to peace. I forgive you. Her father's eyes closed, relief washing over his face. After his passing, Aisha returned home with Hamid and Omar. As the sun set over the courtyard, she sat beneath the rose tree they had planted years ago. Hamid joined her, his hand resting gently over hers. You've changed me, he said quietly. Aisha smiled faintly. And you've taught me that even a forced beginning can lead to something true. They sat in silence as the stars appeared, the air filled with the scent of roses and the quiet song of crickets. The house that had once felt like a prison was now a sanctuary, built not from wealth or duty, but from love that had taken root against all odds. Aisha looked up at the sky, her heart calm. The girl who had been forced to marry a stranger was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned that sometimes, life's cruelest turns lead to its most beautiful destinations. And that night, as the wind rustled through the garden, she finally felt free.